not some object you can own because my father's a coward." The words left Paula Navarro's mouth firm, unwavering, even as her heart slammed against her ribs like it was trying to escape what she couldn't. Across the glass desk, sleek, modern, reflecting the Chicago skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows, Donald Gordon looked up from the contract he'd been examining. The late afternoon sun cut through the room at brutal angles, turning his eyes into something cold and calculating, like winter given human form. "Your father signed the papers." His voice was quiet in that way dangerous men speak when they don't need to raise their voices to be heard. Each word measured, controlled, wrapped in authority, that made even breathing feel like permission. "You're not an object, Miss Navarro. You're collateral. There's a legal difference." Paula's hands trembled at her sides, so she locked them behind her back, nails digging into her wrists hard enough to leave marks. $2 million. That's what Navarro Plummer had gambled away, and what he'd traded her to cover. And now she stood in this penthouse office downtown, surrounded by men in tailored suits with violence in their posture, like merchandise waiting to be inspected. "Then you're going to be disappointed," she said, forcing her chin up because surrender wasn't in her vocabulary. "Because I'm not anyone's property." Donald Gordon's expression didn't quite shift. The look was colder than dismissal, sharper, like a scalpel finding exactly where to cut. "You have two options. You come work for me, live under my roof, and follow my rules until your father's debt is paid." He leaned forward slightly, utterly in control, every movement deliberate. "Or I start collecting from the people you love. Your twin siblings are 17, correct? Still minors." The threat landed like a physical blow. "Welcome back, beautiful souls and kindred spirits. Before we begin, go ahead and subscribe, like, and share where you're watching from. It always fills my heart to see our storytelling family growing across the globe. Every click, every comment, every bit of support helps us continue bringing these powerful stories to life. So find your comfortable space, settle in deep, and let me take you somewhere unforgettable." Paula had been finishing her emergency rotation at Metro General Hospital when her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost declined it. She was elbow-deep in sutures, her attending physician doctor, Sarah Chen, watching her work, nodding approval at her steady hands. But something cold crawled up her spine, something that whispered, "Answer it." "Miss Navarro, I'm calling regarding a business matter involving your father, Navarro Plummer." The world tilted. The overhead lights suddenly too bright. Someone's monitor beeped 3 beds down. Her hands went still over the patient's wound. "I'm sorry, what?" "Your father has registered you as collateral on a private debt of $2 million. The payment is significantly overdue. You have 24 hours to arrange settlement, or alternative collection methods will be implemented." The line went dead. Paula stood frozen in that emergency bay, still wearing bloody gloves, her mind splintering into 1,000 directions at once. Navarro, the man who drifted in and out of their lives like smoke, always chasing the next big win at the tables, the next scheme that would turn everything around, the man she'd stopped believing in years ago. He'd used her name, traded her freedom, sold her future to feed his addiction. She tried calling him 19 times between the hospital and her apartment. Every call went straight to voicemail, that same recording, his voice warm and familiar and utterly absent. By the time she reached her building, an envelope was waiting. Black, expensive paper. Inside, photographs. Marcus and Maya leaving Roosevelt High School, backpacks over their shoulders, laughing about something, completely unaware they'd become leverage. Her roommate Brooklyn, coming out of their apartment building, Dr. Chen leaving the hospital. And underneath the photographs, a business card. Matte black, embossed with a single phone number and 3 words. Donald Gordon Enterprises. Her hands shook as she dialed. A man's voice answered on the first ring, smooth as aged whiskey, dangerous as broken glass. "Miss Navarro, I've been expecting your call. Tomorrow, 2 p.m., the Morrison Tower downtown, penthouse level. Come alone. We have much to discuss about your father's obligations and your new arrangements." Paula didn't sleep that night. She sat at her kitchen table, staring at those photographs, calculating impossible mathematics. $2 million, 8 months until graduation, her entire future mapped out. Scholarships earned, residency programs interested, the community clinic she'd dreamed of building since she was 12 years old, and watched her mother die from treatable complications because they couldn't afford insulin. All of it, traded away by the man who was supposed to protect her. When 2 p.m. came, Paula dressed in the only professional clothes she owned, a black blazer and slacks purchased for hospital interviews. She took the train downtown because she couldn't afford a cab. She rode the private elevator to the penthouse because she had no other choice. And when those doors opened, Donald Gordon was waiting. 32, maybe 33. Expensive suit that probably cost more than her entire year's tuition. Dark hair swept back, jaw sharp enough to cut, and eyes that assessed her like she was a balance sheet that needed reconciling. "Miss Navarro." He gestured to the chair across from his desk. "Please, sit. We have business to conduct." That's when she said it. When she drew the first line in a war she couldn't win but refused to surrender. "I'm not some object you can own because my father's a coward." And Donald Gordon smiled that cold, calculated smile that told her everything was about to change forever. Before we dive into Paula's story, I want to say thank you for being here. This channel exists because of you, people who love complex characters, impossible choices, and stories that don't shy away from the messy truth. If that's you, subscribe and join our family. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Now, let's get back to Paula. Beautiful work, Paula, doctor. Sarah Chen stepped back from the suture tray, nodding with that rare approval she reserved for exceptional technique. Clean, efficient, textbook perfect. You're going to make an excellent trauma surgeon. Paula felt warmth bloom in her chest despite the exhaustion weighing down her bones. 18 hours into her emergency rotation, 3 successful procedures, and praise from the woman who'd mentored her since sophomore year. This was why she'd sacrificed everything, worked 3 jobs, studied until her eyes burned. Moments like this, where medicine felt less like work and more like calling. Her phone buzzed in her scrubs pocket. Unknown number. She almost declined it, but something made her answer. "Miss Navarro, I'm calling regarding a business matter involving your father, Navarro Plumber." The sterile smell of the hospital suddenly felt suffocating. Paula moved toward the hallway, away from Dr. Chen's curious glance. "I'm sorry. Who is this?" "That's not important. What's important is that your father owes a substantial debt, $2 million, to be precise. You've been listed as collateral." The words didn't make sense. They couldn't. "There's been a mistake. I don't have anything to do with my father's business. The contract suggests otherwise. You have 24 hours to make arrangements, Miss Navarro. After that, we begin alternative collection methods." The line went dead. Paula's hands shook as she tried calling her father. Once, twice, 7 times. Each call went straight to a disconnected message, that robotic voice confirming what her gut already knew. He was gone. Vanished like he always did, when consequences finally caught up. She left the hospital in a daze, Dr. Chen's concerned questions bouncing off her like she was underwater. The train ride home blurred into nothing. $2 million, collateral, alternative collection methods. The phrases circled her mind like vultures. The envelope was waiting when she climbed the stairs to her 3rd-floor apartment. Heavy black paper, expensive, wrong against the chipped paint of her door. Inside, photographs. Marcus and Maya walking out of Roosevelt High School. Marcus's arm slung over Maya's shoulders, both of them laughing at something on his phone. Another photo of them at the bus stop. Another getting ice cream at the corner store. Someone had been watching them. Someone had been close enough to count the freckles on Maya's nose. Underneath the photos, a business card. Matte black, minimalist. Just a phone number embossed in silver. Nothing else. No name, no company. Just 10 digits that felt like a noose tightening. Paula's apartment suddenly felt too small, the walls pressing in. She thought about running, grabbing Marcus and Maya and disappearing. But where? With what money? And whoever sent these photos had already proven they could find her family anywhere. Her fingers dialed before her mind caught up. "Miss Navarro." The voice was smooth, cultured, dangerous in its calmness. "I've been expecting your call. Who are you? What do you want?" "Tomorrow, 2 p.m. The Morrison Tower downtown, penthouse level. Come alone, Miss Navarro." A pause, deliberate, letting the silence build pressure. "We have much to discuss about your father's obligations and what happens next." The line went dead for the 2nd time that day, and Paula stood in her tiny kitchen, clutching photos of her siblings, understanding with brutal clarity that her life had just been sold to a stranger, and there was nothing she could do but show up and face whatever came next. The Morrison Tower rose like a glass knife cutting into Chicago's skyline. Paula's reflection stared back at her from the polished lobby, a young woman in a cheap blazer trying to look like she belonged in a building where the doormen wore better suits than most lawyers. The security guard didn't ask questions, just checked her name against a list and pointed toward the private elevator. The ride to the penthouse felt like ascending toward execution. The The doors opened directly into an office that was all windows and power. Chicago sprawled below like a game board, and standing at the center of it was Donald Gordon. Early 30s, dark hair precisely styled, wearing a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her car. But it was his eyes that stopped her breath, cold and assessing, like he could calculate her worth down to the decimal. 2 men flanked him, stone-faced, hands resting near their jackets in that casual way that screamed violence. "Miss Navarro." Donald's voice matched the one from the phone, smooth and controlled. "Please sit." "I'd rather stand." Paula forced steel into her spine. "Look, there's been a mistake. Whatever my father signed, I can fix this. Let me be the debtor. I'll pay you back however long it takes." Donald's expression didn't change. He slid a document across the glass desk. "Your father already made that arrangement. This is the contract. Your signature, notarized and legal." Paula's hands trembled as she picked it up. The signature looked like hers, too perfect, clearly forged. But the notary seal looked real, the legal language dense and binding. "This is fraud. I never signed this." "Prove it in court." Donald leaned back in his chair, utterly relaxed. "That will take, 18 months? 2 years? In the meantime, I have property that needs protecting." He opened a folder, spreading photographs across the desk like a card dealer showing his hand. Marcus and Maya, yes, but also Dr. Chen leaving the hospital, Brooklyn laughing with friends outside their apartment, even her study group at their favorite coffee shop, bent over textbooks. The message was clear. Everyone she cared about was mapped, tracked, vulnerable. Your father understood that to guarantee his sincerity, the collateral had to be something he valued. Donald's voice was matter-of-fact, like discussing stock portfolios. "Unfortunately for you, Miss Navarro, you were all he had left to trade." Rage and terror fought for dominance in Paula's chest. "So what? You're going to kill them if I don't cooperate?" "Kill?" Donald looked almost offended. "No. But accidents happen. Medical careers end over malpractice accusations. College scholarships disappear. 17-year-olds get arrested for drugs they've never seen before." He tilted his head. "I prefer leverage to violence. It's cleaner." Paula's nails bit into her palms. "What do you want from me?" "You have 2 options. You come work for me, live under my roof, and follow my rules until the debt is cleared. Or I start collecting interest from the people in these photos." The room felt airless. "What exactly would I be doing for you?" "Whatever I require. You're a medical student. That skill set has value." Donald stood, buttoning his jacket with precise movements. "But mostly, you'll be exactly where I can see you. Insurance, Miss Navarro. Your father's word means nothing. Yours will mean everything." Paula thought about fighting, running, calling the police. But every scenario ended with the people she loved paying the price. "I need 24 hours to arrange things." "You have 12 hours. Donald checked his watch like they'd just concluded a business meeting. "A car will collect you at midnight. Pack light. Everything else will be provided." The dismissal was clear. Paula turned toward the elevator on legs that didn't feel quite solid, and didn't look back at the man who'd just purchased her life like she was something that could be owned. The black Mercedes arrived at 11:58 p.m., punctual as death. Paula stood on the curb with a single suitcase containing 8 months of her life compressed into 20 pounds. She'd told Marcus and Maya she was staying with a friend to focus on exams. The lie tasted like ash, but it was better than the truth. The drive to Lake Forest took 40 minutes of silent highway, the city lights fading to wealthy darkness. When the car turned through iron gates, Paula's breath caught. The estate wasn't a house, it was a statement. Stone and glass sprawling across manicured grounds, lit like a fortress pretending to be a home. Donald waited at the entrance, somehow still wearing a suit at midnight like sleep was for weaker men. "Miss Navarro, welcome." The word felt obscene. He led her through rooms that belonged in magazines, all clean lines and expensive restraint, until they reached the east wing. "Your suite." He opened double doors to a space larger than her entire apartment. Bedroom, sitting area, bathroom with marble she was afraid to touch. "Everything you need is provided." Paula dropped her suitcase, refusing to be impressed. "I'm finishing medical school. I have 8 months until graduation, and I've worked too hard to stop now." Donald studied her, something like curiosity flickering behind those cold eyes. "Agreed. You'll attend classes, but you'll have security. 2 of my men, always within sight. And my siblings." Paula stepped closer, needing him to understand this wasn't negotiable. Marcus and Maya stay untouched. They finish high school, they go to college, and they never know about this arrangement. I'm not a monster, Miss Navarro. His voice carried something almost like offense. I have no interest in children. They're safe as long as you honor your side of this arrangement. Paula's jaw tightened. And you don't touch me. Whatever this arrangement is, it doesn't include my body. The pause stretched long enough to make her heart hammer. Then Donald smiled, and it was more dangerous than any threat he'd made. I don't need to force women into my bed, Miss Navarro, but understand this. He moved closer, not touching but close enough that she could smell expensive cologne and something darker underneath. You live under my roof. You follow my rules. You go nowhere without my permission. Your freedom is suspended until your father's debt is paid. Every choice you make, I approve first. Every person you see, I know about. You belong to me now, whether you like it or not. The words settled over her like a shroud. The staff will show you around tomorrow. Breakfast is at 7. Don't be late. He turned toward the door, then paused. And Miss Navarro? Don't try to run. I'd hate for your siblings to learn about their father's mistakes because you made a foolish choice. The door closed with a soft click that sounded like a cell locking. Paula stood in the center of her gilded cage, surrounded by luxury that felt like mockery. She walked to the bedroom door and turned the lock, knowing it was symbolic, that if Donald Gordon wanted to enter, no lock would stop him. But the small defiance mattered. She sat on the edge of the bed, too exhausted to cry, too angry to sleep. 8 months until graduation. 8 months of being watched, controlled, owned. 8 months of pretending her life hadn't been traded away by a man who'd never valued anything except the next bet. Through the window, Chicago glittered in the distance, full of people sleeping in their own beds, making their own choices, living lives that belonged to them. Paula Navarro was no longer one of them. She was property now, collateral for a debt she didn't owe, belonging to a man who collected people like other men collected art. And somewhere in the dark, her father was probably at another table, rolling dice, chasing another dream, completely unaware that he'd already gambled away the only thing that ever mattered. The stares started on day 3. Paula walked into advanced pathology with 2 men in dark suits following 3 steps behind, and the entire lecture hall went silent. Not the normal pre-class chatter dying down, but the sharp, sudden silence of scandal arriving. By the end of the week, the whispers had crystallized into rumors: mob girlfriend, drug debt, witness protection. None of them true, all of them damaging. Her study group stopped inviting her to sessions. People she'd known for 3 years suddenly found reasons to sit elsewhere in the cafeteria. Even Dr. Chen pulled her aside, concern etched in the lines around her eyes. Paula, if you're in trouble, there are resources, people who can help. But there weren't. Not for this. At the estate, Donald maintained a strange, formal distance. They shared breakfast at 7, sitting at opposite ends of a table built for 12. He asked about her classes with what seemed like genuine interest. Discussed case studies she mentioned. Never touched her. Never even stood too close. It was almost worse than hostility, this careful politeness that pretended she was a guest instead of a prisoner. 2 weeks in, Paula couldn't sleep. The silence of the estate felt oppressive after the constant noise of city living. She wandered downstairs, drawn by light spilling from Donald's study. He sat behind his desk, papers spread before him, jaw tight with tension she recognized from her own mirror. Do you ever sleep? The question escaped before she could stop it. Donald looked up, surprise flickering across his features before the mask returned. Sleep is a luxury for people who don't have enemies. Paula leaned against the doorframe, exhaustion making her bold. Who are your enemies right now? He studied her for a long moment, weighing something. The Russo family. Vincent Russo thinks he can move into my territory. His smile was sharp enough to cut. He's wrong. If you're going to keep me here like a prisoner, the least you can do is tell me what I'm caught in the middle of. Paula crossed her arms. I'd rather know what's happening than sit in my room pretending everything's normal. Something shifted in Donald's expression, like he'd just seen her clearly for the first time. He gestured to the chair across from him. The Russos have been expanding south from their base in Little Italy. They've been hitting my collection operations, undercutting my supply chains, trying to make me look weak to the families I do business with. He explained the chess game of Chicago's underworld with the same clarity he might use for a business presentation. Territory maps, revenue streams, the delicate balance of fear and respect that kept his empire intact. Paula listened, her mind automatically filing information, connecting threads. You mentioned a shipment delay on Tuesday, she said. The one coming through the port. That was Russo interference? Donald's eyebrows rose. You remember that conversation? I remember everything. Paula met his gaze. Photographic memory. It's how I got through medical school while working 3 jobs. You're more observant than I gave you credit for. Something almost like respect colored his voice. You bought 8 months of my life. You didn't buy my intelligence or my attention. Paula stood, suddenly too tired for this careful dance. Those I'm giving you because I'd rather understand my cage than bang against the bars blindly. She turned toward the door, but his voice stopped her. Paula. Her first name in his mouth sounded different, less clinical. You're not stupid enough to think this is a cage you can escape, but you're smart enough to survive it. That's more than most people in my world can say. It wasn't comfort. It wasn't even kindness. But it was acknowledgement, and in the strange, twisted reality she now inhabited, that felt almost like progress. She climbed the stairs to her suite, Donald's words following her into the dark, and wondered when exactly she'd stopped seeing him as just her captor and started seeing him as something far more complicated. The blood came through the front door at 11:47 p.m. Paula heard the commotion from her suite, urgent voices and heavy footsteps that didn't belong to the estate's usual careful silence. She emerged onto the landing to see 3 men half carrying, half dragging a fourth through the marble foyer. The injured man, Jackson. She'd learned his name from breakfast conversations, left a trail of red across the white stone. Donald appeared from his study, phone already pressed to his ear. Where the hell is Morrison? A pause, his jaw tightening. Then find another doctor. Now. Jackson made a sound between a groan and a scream. The wound was in his side, blood spreading fast across his shirt, the kind of bleeding that meant something vital had been hit. Paula's medical training overrode every other instinct. She was down the stairs before conscious thought caught up. How long ago was he stabbed? Donald's head snapped toward her. 15 minutes. Paula, go back upstairs. Is your doctor coming? She was already moving toward Jackson, her hands automatically checking pulse points, assessing color, calculating blood loss. He's not answering. Hospital would mean police involvement. Donald's voice was flat, final. Paula looked at Jackson's face, gray and sweating, eyes rolling back. She'd seen this before, rotating through trauma bays, the narrow window between survivable and fatal. Then get me towels, hot water, a sewing kit, vodka for sterilization, and everyone out except 2 people to hold him down. Paula, you're not qualified to. I'm more qualified than anyone else in this house. She met Donald's eyes. No fear, just medical assessment. He has maybe 20 minutes before he bleeds out. Your choice. Donald stared at her for 3 seconds that felt like hours. Then he snapped orders, and the house erupted into controlled chaos. They cleared the dining room table. Paula scrubbed her hands with vodka that burned, her mind automatically running through procedures, complications, what she had versus what she needed. Not ideal, nowhere close to sterile, but possible. Jackson was barely conscious when they laid him out. Paula cut away his shirt, exposing the wound. Deep, angled, probably a 4-inch blade. She pressed towels against it, applying pressure while she assessed. He's lucky. Missed the kidney, maybe nicked the intestine, but I don't think it perforated. Donald stood at her shoulder, perfectly still. What do you need? Time and steady hands. Paula threaded the needle from the sewing kit, her fingers not shaking despite the adrenaline screaming through her system. Hold him. This is going to hurt. It took 40 minutes. Paula worked in the focused silence she'd learned in emergency rotations, blocking out Jackson's screams, the men holding him down, Donald watching her every move. She cleaned, sutured, layer by layer, talking herself through it like Dr. Chen had taught her. When she finally tied off the last stitch, her hands were cramping and Jackson had passed out, but his breathing was steady and the bleeding had stopped. Paula stepped back, suddenly aware of how much blood covered her clothes. He needs antibiotics, real ones, not vodka, and someone should watch him for the next 12 hours in case of internal bleeding I missed. Donald was already on his phone, issuing quiet orders. When he hung up, he looked at Paula differently, like seeing her clearly for the first time. You saved his life. She stripped off the bloody gloves someone had found. I'm a doctor, or I will be. It's what I do. You didn't ask questions. You didn't hesitate. His voice carried something like wonder. Most people freeze. Paula's hands started shaking now that the crisis had passed. She gripped the edge of the table. My father might be a coward and a gambler, but he was a paramedic before he destroyed his life. He taught me that hesitation kills people. She looked at Jackson's unconscious form. Will he be safe now? Whoever did this will be handled. Donald's voice went cold, final. He led her to the kitchen, poured 2 glasses of whiskey from a bottle that probably cost more than her textbooks. Paula drank hers in one burning swallow, the alcohol hitting her empty stomach like fire. "You're not what I expected," Donald said quietly. "Neither are you." Paula set down the glass. "But we're both stuck with the arrangement, so we might as well stop pretending I'm just property you're storing." Something shifted in his expression, a calculation being remade. "The men saw what you did tonight. That changes things." "Changes them how?" "They respect capability. You just proved yours." Donald refilled her glass. "Welcome to the organization, Miss Navarro. You just became valuable beyond your father's debt." It should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like the cage had just gotten more complicated, and Paula wasn't sure if she'd gained leverage or simply given Donald another reason to never let her go. The rain came down in sheets, turning the library steps slick and treacherous. Paula tucked her pathology textbook under her jacket and nodded to Marcus and Levi, the 2 guards who'd been her constant shadows for 6 weeks. They fell into formation, flanking her as they moved toward the black SUV parked at the curb. The van came out of nowhere. It cut across 2 lanes, tires screaming, blocking their path. Paula's brain registered threat half a second before the doors opened, and 4 men emerged, weapons already drawn. Marcus shoved her behind him, his gun clearing leather, but the first shot caught him in the chest. He went down hard, blood spreading across wet concrete. Levi returned fire, grabbing Paula's arm, trying to pull her toward cover. But there were too many of them, moving with professional precision. Not random street thugs, but trained operators. One of them reached for Paula, his hand closing on her jacket. Then the world exploded. Additional vehicles materialized, men pouring out with military efficiency. And Donald, appearing like something summoned from violence itself, his weapon tracking targets with lethal calm. 2 shots, center mass, and the man reaching for Paula dropped. Donald moved through the attackers like choreographed death, each movement economical, precise, final. It was over in 40 seconds. Bodies on the ground, the acrid smell of gunpowder mixing with rain, and Paula standing frozen, her mind trying to process what she'd just witnessed. Not the sanitized violence of movies, but real, brutal, immediate. The way men looked when life left them, the sounds they made, the copper smell of blood mixing with Chicago rain. Donald was suddenly there, his hands on her face, her shoulders, checking for injuries with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Did they touch you? Did any of them put hands on you?" Paula couldn't make her voice work. She just stared at him, at the blood spattered across his expensive shirt, at eyes that were still cold with killing. "Paula." His voice sharpened, command and fear wrapped together. "That wasn't a question. Did they touch you?" "I'm fine." The words came out shaky. "I'm not hurt. Marcus is alive." Vest caught it. Donald's hands were still on her shoulders, gripped tight enough to bruise. "Get in the car. Now." The drive back to the estate happened in silence, broken only by terse radio communications. Paula sat in the back seat, shaking despite the heat blasting through the vents, replaying those 40 seconds on loop. The efficiency of it, the practiced ease. This was Donald's world, not theoretical anymore, but visceral and real. At the estate, Donald led her to his study, poured whiskey with hands that were steady despite everything. When he handed her the glass, Paula noticed his knuckles were split, probably from the one attacker he'd taken down without shooting. "That was Vincent Russo," Donald said, his voice carefully controlled. "He knows taking you would cripple me." Paula's hand tightened on the glass. "Why would losing me cripple you? I'm just collateral for a debt." The words hung between them, challenge and question wrapped together. Donald was quiet for a long moment, something working behind his eyes. "Because you've become more than that, and every organization in Chicago knows it now." "What does that mean?" "It means you're not just a medical student living in my house until a debt is paid." He set down his own glass, jaw tight. "It means you've saved one of my men. It means my organization respects you. It means He stopped, the admission catching. "Means you what?" Paula's heart was hammering for reasons that had nothing to do with the attack. Donald's gaze met hers, and for the first time since she'd met him, the mask cracked completely. "It means I would burn Chicago to the ground before I let anyone take you. And that's a problem. Because I don't feel that way about assets or collateral or business arrangements." The truth settled over the room like a weight. Paula stood there, still wearing clothes damp from rain and probably spotted with Marcus's blood, staring at the man who'd just killed 2 people to protect her. The man who'd bought her like property but looked at her now like she was something infinitely more valuable and infinitely more dangerous to his carefully controlled world. "So what am I then?" Her voice came out quieter than intended. Donald's smile was bitter, almost painful. That's what terrifies me, Paula, because I'm starting to forget you were ever anything but mine. The study became their shared territory. Donald had insisted after the attack, his tone brooking no argument. You work here, where I can see you. So Paula spread her textbooks across the leather sofa, her laptop balanced on the coffee table, while Donald conducted his empire from behind the mahogany desk. It should have been awkward, oppressive even, but somehow it wasn't. 3 weeks of this new routine, and Paula found herself looking forward to the quiet hours after dinner. The scratch of her pen on paper, the low murmur of Donald's phone calls in Italian or Russian or whatever language the business required. Sometimes he'd ask about her coursework, and she'd explain cardiac pathology or surgical techniques, and he'd listen with genuine interest that still surprised her. Tonight, her pharmacology textbook sat unopened, while Donald reviewed contracts, the silence comfortable until he broke it. Why did you choose medicine? Paula looked up, found him watching her with that focused intensity he usually reserved for territorial negotiations. That's random. Humor me. She set down her pen, the answer coming easier than expected. Because I wanted to fix things. My mother died when I was 12 because we couldn't afford her medication. Diabetes, completely manageable, except we had no insurance, and my father was already deep in gambling debt. The memory still hurt, sharp and immediate. I watched her fade away from treatable complications, watched her apologize for dying like it was her fault we were poor. I decided then that I would never let money determine who deserves to live. Donald was quiet for a long moment. That's why you want the community clinic, the one you mention in your sleep sometimes. Paula's breath caught. You've heard that? Your suite is next to mine. The walls are thicker than most, but not soundproof. Something almost like gentleness entered his voice. You talk about it often. Benevolent medical center. Free care for underserved communities. You've planned every detail. The fact that he'd been listening, remembering, cataloging her dreams like they mattered, shifted something in her chest. That's still the plan. After I pay off my father's debt and graduate, that's what I'm building. If you survive being associated with me long enough to practice medicine. The bitterness in his tone surprised her. Paula closed her textbook completely, turning to face him. Can I ask you something? You're going to regardless. Why do you do this? She gestured vaguely, encompassing the estate, the organization, the violence that lived just beneath the surface. You're clearly intelligent enough to be anything. You understand complex business. You speak 5 languages. You could have been a legitimate businessman. Donald's laugh was sharp. Paula, legitimate power requires you to be born into the right family with the right name. You need the prep school credentials, the Ivy League connections, the country club memberships that come from generational wealth. He stood, moving to the window overlooking the grounds. This power, I built with my own hands. No one gave it to me because of my last name or my father's reputation. And no one can take it away except through force, which I'm very good at defending against. Paula heard the vulnerability beneath the words, the anger at a system that had locked him out. So you built your own empire outside their rules. I built something that matters, that endures, that no one can dismiss or minimize or take away because I wasn't born in the right zip code. He turned back to her, something raw in his expression. You understand that. You're doing the same thing with medicine. Building something they told you that you couldn't have. The parallel hung between them, unexpected and uncomfortable. 2 people fighting for legitimacy in systems designed to exclude them, using very different methods but driven by the same fundamental refusal to accept the limitations imposed by birth. Paula felt the air shift, charged with tension that had nothing to do with contracts or debt. Donald felt it too. She could see it in the way his jaw tightened, the way his hands flexed at his sides. He moved toward the door, creating deliberate distance. You should sleep. You have pharmacology exam tomorrow. Donald. Good night, Paula. The words were final, careful, like he was reinforcing a boundary that was becoming dangerously thin. Paula gathered her books, but paused at the door. Thank you for listening. About my mother. His back was to her, shoulders tense. You're not what I expected. You never have been. She climbed the stairs to her suite, Donald's admission following her into the dark, and wondered when exactly the walls between captor and captive had started crumbling, and whether either of them could stop what was building in the ruins. Everything's about to change. The walls between them are crumbling, but Chicago's underworld doesn't care about feelings, it only understands blood and power. If you're not subscribed yet, do it now. because the next part of this story gets dangerous, and I promise you won't see the betrayal coming." Marcus Kane's expression was grim when he entered the study at 2 a.m., the kind of news that couldn't wait for morning etched in every line of his face. Paula sat on the sofa reviewing case studies, but Donald gestured for her to stay when she moved to leave. "We have a problem," Marcus said, sliding a folder across the desk. "The attacks aren't just Russo. There's someone inside feeding him information. Shipment schedules, security rotations, your movements." He looked at Paula. Hers too. Donald's jaw tightened as he scanned the documents. "How long?" "At least 3 months, maybe longer." Paula set down her textbook, her mind already working through the implications. She'd been present at enough strategy meetings now to understand the organization's structure, to know who had access to what information. She thought about conversations she'd overheard, patterns she'd noticed. The photographic memory that had gotten her through medical school suddenly cataloging details she hadn't realized mattered. "Victor Kane," she said quietly. Both men turned to stare at her. Donald's voice was carefully controlled. "Victor has been with me for 6 years. What makes you think it's him?" Paula stood, moving to the desk. "He's Marcus's cousin. I heard them arguing last week in the East Hall about family loyalty and debts. Marcus told him some things were more important than blood." She looked at Marcus. "You suspected him already, didn't you?" Marcus's silence was confirmation. "And I saw him 3 days ago in the garden, using a phone I'd never seen before. A burner cell, probably. Why would your logistics coordinator need an untraceable phone when all your business communications are encrypted anyway?" Donald was already moving, issuing orders into his phone. The investigation took 6 hours. By morning, the evidence was damning. Victor had been feeding detailed intelligence to Vincent Russo for 4 months, positioning himself to take over a significant portion of Donald's territory once the takeover was complete. But there was more. Donald's face was carved from stone when he called Paula back to the study. "Victor's brother was killed by my father 15 years ago. Territorial dispute in Pilsen. Victor was 17, watched it happen. He poured whiskey despite the early hour. This isn't just about money, it's revenge. There's something else," Marcus said, his voice heavy. "We traced back how Russo even knew about Paula, how they found Navarro in the first place." Paula's stomach dropped. "Victor found your father 18 months ago, gambling at one of Russo's underground clubs. Your father had debts, but nothing close to 2 million. Donald's eyes met hers, something like regret flickering there. Victor inflated the numbers, then suggested a way out. Told Navarro he could trade his daughter as collateral to a powerful man who'd forgive the debt if she provided value. The room tilted. "My father was set up?" "Your father was a pawn," Donald corrected. "But he still signed the papers. Still traded you. Victor just made it easier, more appealing. He knew introducing you into my life would create vulnerability." Paula sat down hard, processing. Her entire captivity, engineered as a weapon. Her father still guilty, still a coward, but manipulated into betrayal by someone else's revenge. "They're meeting tonight," Marcus said. "Bridgeport, the old steel mill by the river." Victor and Russo finalizing their plans. Donald was already reaching for his jacket. "How many men?" "Russo's bringing 12. Victor will have access codes to our systems, layouts of the estate. Then we end this." Donald's voice carried lethal finality. "Tonight," Paula stood. "I'm coming with you." "Absolutely not." Donald's tone left no room for argument. "You stay here where it's secure. Victor used my father to get to you. This is my fight too." Paula moved closer, refusing to back down. "And you need me. My father gambled at those clubs for years before Victor found him. I know people there, connections from when I had to drag him home. They might know things about Victor's operation that could help." "Paula, you said I've become more than collateral, more than an asset." She held his gaze. "So stop treating me like something fragile you need to protect, and let me help you finish what was started with my name." The argument stretched between them, wills colliding. Finally, Donald's expression shifted, resignation and respect mixing together. "You stay in the car. You don't leave the car under any circumstances. And if shooting starts, Samuel drives you directly back here." It wasn't agreement so much as acknowledgement that she'd already decided, and he couldn't stop her without restraints. "Understood," Paula said. Marcus shook his head. "You're both insane." Donald's smile was cold and sharp. "Victor wanted to make me vulnerable. He's about to learn exactly what vulnerability actually costs." The Bridgeport steel mill rose against the night sky like a skeleton, all rusted girders and shattered windows, 40 years of abandonment turning industrial ambition into urban decay. Donald's convoy killed their lights 2 blocks out, men moving into position with practiced silence. Paula stayed in the SUV as promised. Samuel behind the wheel, engine running for quick escape. Through the windshield, she watched Donald's team advance, watched them enter through the southern loading bay, watched the building explode with gunfire. 30 seconds later, it was an ambush. Muzzle flashes lit the darkness like deadly fireflies. Donald's men scattered for cover, pinned down by shooters positioned on the upper levels. Too many shooters, too many angles, a kill box designed to massacre anyone who entered. Paula's medical training screamed that people were dying in there. But her mind, the photographic memory that cataloged everything, suddenly pulled up something else. Her father, drunk on a Tuesday night 5 years ago, rambling about his youth working the steel mill before the closure, talking about the catwalk systems, the maze of metal walkways that connected the upper floors. She grabbed the radio from Samuel's hand. "Donald, can you hear me?" Static. Then his voice, tight with controlled violence. "Paula, stay in the catwalk system above you. Northeastern section." She closed her eyes, visualizing her father's drunken descriptions, the layout he'd drawn on a napkin. "It's held up by 4 main support columns. If you can collapse it, it'll block their primary firing position and give you cover to flank from the western side." Silence that felt like an eternity. "Marcus, you heard that?" Donald's voice crackled. "Take 3 men. Plant charges on those supports. 2 minutes. Paula watched through the windshield, counting seconds, her heart hammering against her ribs. At the 90-second mark, the explosion lit up the night. The northeastern catwalk system collapsed in a shriek of tortured metal, exactly as she'd predicted, cutting off the elevated firing positions. Donald's team moved immediately, flanking, pressing the advantage. The gunfire intensified, then gradually died. Samuel's radio crackled. "Building secure. Boss wants Miss Navarro inside." Paula was moving before he finished speaking, running toward the mill despite Samuel's protests. She found Donald in what had been the main floor, surrounded by bodies and the acrid smell of gunpowder. His men were securing the perimeter, but it was over. The Russo operation, dismantled in 15 minutes of brutal efficiency. And there, against a concrete pillar, hands zip-tied behind him, was Victor Kane. Blood ran from a cut above his eye, his expensive suit torn and dirty. His gaze locked on Paula, something like hatred burning there. You're the reason this is all falling apart. Donald's so obsessed with you. He's making mistakes, getting soft." Paula moved closer, her voice steady despite the chaos. "No, you made the mistake thinking that revenge was worth more than loyalty. You used my father, manipulated a desperate man, just to hurt someone else. That's not strength. That's just cruelty." Victor spat blood. "Your father was pathetic, trading his daughter for..." The gun materialized in Donald's hand, pressed against Victor's temple. The movement so fast Paula barely tracked it. "That's enough." The shot echoed through the empty mill. Victor slumped, and it was over. 15 years of revenge, ended in a second. Donald holstered his weapon with mechanical precision, then turned to Paula. His face was spattered with blood, his expensive shirt ruined, but his eyes were clear, focused entirely on her. "You saved us today. Your plan, your knowledge of this building." Paula's legs suddenly felt weak, adrenaline draining away and leaving exhaustion in its wake. "I just wanted to survive." "You did more than survive." Donald moved closer, not touching but close enough that she could feel his heat. "You fought. You've been fighting since the moment you walked into my office. Most people in your position would have broken. You just keep getting stronger." Around them, his men cleared bodies, secured evidence, worked with efficient professionalism. But in the space between Paula and Donald, something else hung in the air. Recognition, maybe, or acknowledgement that whatever they'd started as, captor and captive, they'd become something far more complicated in the ruins of this steel mill. "We should go," Paula said quietly. "Before the police arrive." Donald nodded, but his gaze didn't leave hers. "After tonight, Victor and Russo's operation is finished. Your father's debt, the reason you're here, it's essentially paid. You could leave. Go back to your life." The words hung between them like a question neither was ready to answer. Paula looked around the mill, at the violence and chaos and the way Donald's men watched her now with respect instead of suspicion. "Let's talk about that somewhere that doesn't smell like gunpowder and death." His smile was brief, almost painful. "Fair enough." They walked out together, and Paula realized she wasn't sure anymore what leaving would even mean. or if the cage she'd been fighting had become something else entirely while she wasn't looking. The estate felt different in the hours after the steel mill. Dawn was breaking over Lake Forest, washing everything in pale gold that made violence feel distant, almost unreal. Paula sat in the study, still wearing clothes that smelled like gunpowder and rust, while Donald spread documents across his desk with careful precision. Your father's original debt was $80,000. His voice was steady, clinical, like presenting medical findings. Victor Kane inflated it to $2 million and forged additional documentation to make it appear insurmountable. He convinced Navarro that other collectors were targeting Marcus and Maya, that trading you to me was the only way to keep them safe. Paula's hands tightened on the chair arms. So my father was manipulated. Your father was weak and desperate, and Victor exploited that. Donald's gaze met hers, but Navarro still signed, still chose the easier path. The cruelty of your situation was orchestrated, but he was a willing participant. The truth settled like sediment, murky and complicated. Her father, neither villain nor victim, just human and flawed, and ultimately the reason she'd spent 8 months in this gilded prison. Donald pushed another folder across the desk. This is the deed to a medical building in South Chicago. 15,000 square feet, fully renovated. It's in your name, completely paid. No liens, no strings. Paula's breath caught as she opened the folder. Property documents, legal and binding, her name printed in bold letters. I don't understand. There's also an account with $800,000. For equipment, staffing, whatever you need for your community clinic. He leaned back, something unreadable in his expression. The debt is cleared, Paula. Victor's betrayal invalidates the original contract. You're free to go. You can walk out tonight, finish medical school, open benevolent medical center, and never see me again. The words hung in the air like an offering and a threat all at once. Paula stared at the documents, at the freedom she'd dreamed about for 8 months laid out in legal paper and property deeds, everything she'd wanted since she was 12 years old, watching her mother die from treatable complications. The clinic, the resources, the ability to help people who couldn't help themselves. All of it, hers. No strings, no conditions. She looked up at Donald, at the man who'd bought her like property and was now handing back her life. Why would you give me this? Because you earned it. Because you saved Jackson's life, figured out Victor's betrayal, helped us survive tonight. His jaw tightened. Because keeping you here against your will was always about a debt that turned out to be fabricated, and I won't perpetuate Victor's manipulation. Paula stood, moving to the window, watching dawn turn the grounds golden. Behind her, she heard Donald stand too, felt him move closer but not touching. Or you could stay. His voice was different now, vulnerable in a way she'd never heard. Not as collateral, not as property, but as my partner, equal stake in everything I've built. Your clinic operates openly, legitimately funded through channels I'll establish. You finish medical school in 2 months. You build what you dreamed. But you do it with me. Paula turned to face him. You're asking me to choose a life with a criminal. Yes. No apology, no softening. I'm asking you to choose a life with me, knowing exactly what I am. I can't offer you safety from my world, but I can offer you protection within it. I can offer you respect, resources, and something I've never offered anyone. He paused, and something raw flickered in his eyes. My complete trust. And what do you get from this partnership? Donald moved closer, close enough that she could see the exhaustion etched around his eyes, the blood still dried on his collar. You, the woman who saved my life, who challenges me, who sees past the fear I create in others. I'm asking you to stay, because somewhere between collecting a debt and nearly losing you to my enemies, I stopped seeing you as collateral and started seeing you as the only person I want standing beside me. The confession hung between them, honest and terrifying. Paula looked at the documents on his desk, at the freedom she could claim, then back at Donald, at the man offering something more complicated than freedom, partnership. Equality, a choice made with clear eyes and no illusions. I'll stay. The words came out steady, certain. Not because I'm owned, not because I'm afraid, but because I choose you, Donald Gordon, and because this partnership might be the only way I can build something good from something that started with my father's worst mistake. Something shifted in Donald's expression, relief and wonder mixing together. You're sure? I've been fighting you for 8 months. If I didn't see something worth staying for, I would have found a way to destroy you by now. Paula smiled. And it felt real for the first time since that phone call in the hospital. Besides, you need someone to keep you from making stupid decisions. Consider it medical consultation. Donald's laugh was brief, surprised. Is that what we're calling this? We're calling it whatever we want. That's the point of partnership. He extended his hand, formal, sealing something that had stopped being business months ago. Paula took it, and when he pulled her closer, she didn't resist. They stood in the study as dawn broke fully over Chicago. Two people who'd started as captor and captive, becoming something neither had planned for. Your clinic opens in 6 months, Donald said quietly. We'll make sure it has everything it needs. And you stop pretending you don't have enemies who'll use me as leverage. I'll teach you to shoot properly, and how to spot threats. Paula pulled back enough to meet his eyes. This is insane. Completely. His smile was real, transforming his face. But you chose it anyway. She had. The black girl traded to clear a debt, now standing as equal partner to Chicago's most dangerous man, turning her cage into an empire and her captor into the only person who'd ever truly seen her worth. It wasn't the life she'd planned. But standing there in Donald Gordon's study, documents of freedom scattered on his desk while she chose captivity on her own terms, Paula realized that sometimes the best lives were the ones you built from the worst circumstances, and she was just getting started. Paula Navarro went from collateral to partner, from captive to equal. She chose her own dangerous, beautiful empire. If stories like this where women don't just survive but transform their circumstances into power are what you're here for, subscribe. I've got more stories about impossible choices, dangerous love, and characters who refuse to break. Hit that notification bell so you never miss one.